Dear learners and listeners, Namaskar. I am Dr. Shweta and today we are going to learn about a new topic which is attitude. Attitudes directly or indirectly influences every social interaction. This is why the study of attitudes and attitude change is a fundamental area of social psychological research so that we can understand ourselves and others and evaluate the world we live in. So, basically in this lesson we will know about number 1, the main components of attitude, the relationship between attitude and behavior, the ways by which attitude change can be facilitated, and also we would discuss about the concept of social cognition and its biases. Let us first of all understand about the nature of attitude. Attitude are a complex combination of personality, beliefs, values, behaviors and motivations that exist in every person's mind, which help to define our identity, guide our actions and influence how we judge people around us. They cause us to behave in particular ways towards an object or person or event around us, and they also define our favorable and unfavorable evaluations of the things around us. When we use such words that I like this thing or I dislike this thing or I would love to do this thing or I hate a particular thing, this means that we are describing our attitude towards the other object or people or situation, event, etc. Thus, we can say that attitude is a relatively enduring organization of beliefs, feelings and behavioral tendencies, and these are towards socially significant objects, groups, events, situations, etc. That is, whatever we hold about the things around us in our environment, what attitude do we carry? We like them or we do not like them are the favorable or disfavorable attitude towards the world around us. There are various components of attitudes. That means in order to understand the nature of attitude, we must also know that what are the various components that are involved in attitude. Attitudes basically consist of three aspects. Number 1, the affective component. Number 2, the behavioral component. And number 3, the cognitive component. Let us understand these three components one by one. The first component of attitude is the affective component, that is the emotional part which is attached to particular attitude. It refers to the direction, the intensity of a person's evaluation or the emotion, as I said, which is experienced towards the attitude. For example, many people are scared of spiders. So, this negative affective response is likely to cause you to have a negative attitude towards spiders, because the affective component is negative towards a particular object, and this will lead to develop a negative attitude towards a particular thing. Then comes the behavioral component. What is behavioral component? It is the likelihood of acting in a certain manner towards the attitude object. That is, how do you behave towards a particular object. The behavioral component of attitudes refers to past behaviors or experiences regarding an attitude object. Then comes the cognitive component. The cognitive component refers to the thinking part. That is, what is your thought process about a particular thing in the environment. That is, the thinking that brings about development of belief about the attitude object. These three components, which is thinking, feeling and behaving, they come together and we form an attitude towards a person or an object. One of the underlying assumptions about the link between attitudes and behavior is that of consistency. This means that we often or usually expect the behavior of a person to be consistent with the attitudes that they hold, and this is called the principle of consistency, that how consistent we are in holding a particular attitude towards others. The principle of consistency reflects the idea that people are rational. That is, whenever they behave in a particular manner, they behave as per their thought process. That is, they are rational and they attempt to behave rationally at all times, and that a person's behavior should be consistent with their attitude. This means that if I like something, I will always have a favorable attitude towards that thing. But if I dislike something, I will not be able to have a positive attitude towards that thing, which means that I am consistent in my behavior and the attitude which I show to a particular thing. While the principle of consistency is actually clear and a sound one, but it is also clear that people do not always follow it. For example, everyone knows that smoking cigarette leads to cancer. Still they do it. Normally, if you hold a very strong attitude, all the three components of attitude remain consistent and they do not contradict with each other. It has been found that attitudes are held for a long period of time and change, especially when you undergo new experiences. Also, they are characteristics of a person and differ in type and strength from person to person depending upon the socialization and interaction with the social world. This means that we actually hold attitudes for a long time and our attitudes are determined by the socialization process and the people we interact with in our day-to-day environment. Let us also understand that what are the various functions of attitude. As of now, we have discussed about the nature of attitude and the various components of attitude. We must also know that what functions the attitudes cover. Attitudes actually allows us to understand the world around us. How does it do so? Because it provides us knowledge, and this knowledge helps us to understand that how we must behave in the world in which we live in. So, it actually organizes and structure our experiences. Attitude also help us to describe the social group that each one of us belong to. These social group can be religious groups, the family groups or the friends group or political group, etc. That means our attitude determine that what social groups we belong to, that what kind of people we choose to be with. Attitudes also help us to understand who we are, that is, they help us to understand our self-concept and understand ourselves. For example, some people may value equality while others may value freedom. So, basically your attitude determines your self-concept also. Attitudes also helps us to get support, praise and acceptance from others. Why? Because we tend to be with people who praise us. So, for example, your friend and you share common interest and attitude and both of you like each other, and thus it makes it easier to carry on the friendship. Thus, attitude is helping you to adjust in the social interaction. So, this was all about the various functions that attitudes serve. Apart from this, we must also know that how attitudes are formed and can we change the attitudes or it is not possible to change. Let us first of all discuss that how attitudes are formed. Attitudes are basically learnt through our interaction with others. Attitudes are the result of many different influences, yet the common aspect is that it is acquired through different types of learning, because you might have observed that how a young child learns. The young child learns the various attitude towards the objects or events in the environment from the family members. So, let us know that how attitude is actually developed with different types of learnings. First is the direct contact, which means that when a repeated association with the stimuli evokes positive or negative feeling. For example, strong smells, taste and sensory information can bring about strong emotional responses. For example, if a child eats sprouts and dislikes it, there are chances that this dislike will be generalized to other food items similar in color and taste. The second method by which attitude is formed is known as direct instruction. What is direct instruction? when parents give direct instructions to their children or when teachers give direct instructions to their students what to do and what not to do. And this helps us in forming the attitude. That is, this picture is depicting that how a teacher can direct the attitude of the students. Third is interaction with others. Attitudes are also formed when we interact with other people. We are usually in the company of others and adopt the attitudes similar to the group we belong to. You choose such a way of behaving. Why do you do this? Because this behavior will help you to remain in that particular group. So, praise, approval and acceptance as a group member will make you to follow the particular attitude the other person with whom you interact holds. Fourth is, attitudes are also formed with the help of observation learning. How does this happen? For example, if your mother has a fear of stray dogs, she would try to avoid these stray dogs, and when you observe this, you will also develop this similar kind of attitude towards the stray dogs. In addition, the educational system, media, particularly the television, movies, magazines and newspapers, they all influence the attitude formation. For example, this is one advertisement which might change your attitude towards your eating habits. That is, if you eat better, you will feel better. This was all about that how attitude is formed. We must also know that can attitude be changed or not. Let us know how. Attitude once formed are actually very difficult to change, but because they are learnt, they can also be changed with new learning. These changes depends upon the following factors. We might change our attitude depending upon the source. That is, if the source is strong, which tries to change our attitude, then we might change our attitude. Another is, we would change our attitude only if the message is very strong to change the attitude. And lastly, it depends upon the person. The person might have the capacity to change the attitude or he might not have the capacity to change our attitude. Let us discuss about all these factors one by one. Source, that is, we might change our attitude only if the message is conveyed by experts who are considered to be trustworthy, attractive and similar to the person receiving the message. This is the only reason that government these days is hiring the celebrities to convey the various messages that are related to health or cleanliness. Because if the message comes from such people, that is, the source is very strong, then we tend to change our attitude. There is one more example, which is that if Sachin Tendulkar says that a particular drink gives him energy, the target audience is likely to be young children who consider him as a role model in the field of sports. They are likely to buy the drink because they assume that they would be able to play like Sachin Tendulkar. Another is, the message also helps in changing the attitude of the another person. That is, if the message is clear and well organized. Apart from this, it has also been observed that messages that evokes anxiety and fear tend to change the attitude of another person. Thus, an advertisement on soap may explain that perspiration from the body results in bad odor and your friends will turn away from you. So, you would likely to follow that advertisement. Person, that is, the characteristics of the person whose attitude is to be changed plays an important role in attitude change. Attitudes that are strong, personally important, complex and interconnected are difficult to change. Thus, your attitude towards family would be difficult to change rather than preference of a soap or drink, which means that if something is very important to us, then our attitude towards it is very strong and it is unlikely to be changed by anyone. Thus, who, which is the communicator says what to whom, will determine whether the attitude change will take place or it will not take place. Let us also understand about the relationship between attitude and behavior. That is, how our behavior is determined by our attitude. The relationship between attitude and behavior is complex, and it is often difficult to predict one's attitude from his or her behavior. When attitudes are strong and consistent, that is, when the three components of attitude, which is the affective component, the behavioral component and the cognitive components, are very clear and they are stable, they better predict the behavior. But weak, unimportant and ambiguous attitudes are less likely to predict the behavior of the individual. When one holds a very strong attitude or when one is conscious of one's attitude, thereby it is also easily recalled and it is possible to predict behavior. For example, if you hold for yourself that you are very strong, that means it is likely to predict your behavior, which means that you would be behaving strongly in emergency situation. When attitudes have been formed through direct experience, prediction of behavior is more accurate. When one acts under social pressure, attitude may be expressed in diverse ways. An adolescent may not want to smoke or drink because it affects health, but he does it under peer pressure. Thus, his way of thinking is different from his behavior. This indicates that when external influences are minimal, then attitude-behavioral relationship becomes strong. It is important to note whether behavior is spontaneous or well planned. When behavior is deliberated upon and planned, particularly which college to join or when and whom to marry, these issues become important and hence hasty decisions will not be taken. Thus, when we have time to think and it is personally relevant, then the attitude-behavioral relationship will be very strong. Let us come up to the another topic of today's discussion, which is beliefs and behavior. When one has a very strong belief, it often becomes unshakable. For example, a strong belief that God is very strong. Once a belief is formed, you are confident about the occurrence of certain events and how you or people are likely to behave. That is, your belief will determine your attitude. It helps us understand why people behave in a particular way or why an event has taken place. Beliefs help us to organize our experiences in the social world and predict our own behavior as well as the occurrence of the events. Thus, the belief will lead to a particular behavior and this behavior will result in something and the belief will become strong. Let us come up to the last topic of today's discussion, which is social cognition. Social cognition means how do we think and make judgments about the social world around us. Our minds try to make sense of the world around and make necessary adjustments to function in it in adaptable ways. Social cognition refers to the information received from the social world which is interpreted, analyzed and remembered such that we come to think, feel and understand about the people who live around us. But the information coming in is too much, so we have to learn to organize it in the form of schemas. What are these schemas? Schemas are a set of interconnected beliefs, information and examples about the social objects, events and people. Once formed, the schemas guide our thinking and behavior. They simplify information so that we can interpret new information rapidly. There are various types of schemas dealing with persons, events and social roles. Let us understand about these schemas one by one. Attribution, which is understanding the causes of behavior. There are two categories. Either you will attribute your success or failure to internal causes pertaining to personal reasons. For example, I failed poorly because I did not put in effort, or I did well in examination because I put in a great deal of effort. The external causes include anything outside the person. For instance, I failed poorly in the examination because the question paper was tough. That is what is our attribute? How am I attributing my success or failure? I am attributing my success to the internal causes or my failure to the external causes. That is, how am I thinking about a particular phenomena around me? If I failed, I might say that I failed because the question paper was tough, or I might say that I failed because I did not do well. So that means that how am I attributing my success or failure towards the examination, and this will determine that will I be sincere in the exam next time or not. Second comes the sources of errors or biases in social cognition. That is, while thinking about the social world around us, we also tend to make biases in our thought process. The internal or external causes lead us to commit these fundamental attribution errors. For example, when we see another person coming late for a meeting and dropping her notes on the floor, we are likely to assume that the person is clumsy. But when this happens with us, we might say that it happened because I was in a hurry. That is the fundamental attribution bias. We also have a strong negativity bias. That is the tendency to be sensitive to negative information. Let us understand it how. When you are informed about a person who is friendly, intelligent, good looking and arrogant, which bit of information is likely to stand out? And we remembered, yes, it is the negative information. That is, you are likely to ignore all the positive information about an individual and you would only remember the negative information, that the individual is arrogant. And this information will have a stronger influence than the positive one. That is, this information is likely to determine your attitude towards that individual instead of the positive information which you get. That is the negativity bias which we have towards the people around us or towards certain events around us. We often think in terms of what might have been. That is, if I had done that, then I would have performed better. This is known as counterfactual thinking. For example, we desire a good result in examination and do not get it. We show strong regret over the missed opportunity. Then you are likely to say, I should have studied more and then I could have come first and be awarded the scholarship. Either you will study more next time or it could lead you to be depressed about such thinking. This is known as counterfactual thinking. That is, if I had done that or if I had behaved in that particular manner, then this might not have happened. And this thinking determines our attitude. Then comes the confirmatory bias. It is the tendency to notice and search for information that support one's beliefs and ignore information that do not confirm it. People also tend to ignore basic information and get influenced by the distinctive features of the object. Before I end up, let us summarize what we have discussed in today's program. We discussed that attitudes are actually favorable or unfavorable evaluation of people, objects, ideas and situations. They consist of three components, which is the cognitive component, the affective component and the behavioral component, and these three components combine to create an attitude about an attitude object. Attitude also serve important function of understanding the world, which is the social cognition, and help define social groups and our identity and help gain acceptance from others. These attitudes are actually formed through different types of learning. We discussed that it happens with the help of direct contact, direct instructions, interaction with others and also observational learning. Attitudes that are once formed are very difficult to change. Yet, the change is possible because attitudes can be learnt under new conditions. Two types of attitude change exist: incongruent and congruent change. Congruent attitude changes easier. Attitude change depends upon the source, message and the target person. Conditions under which attitudes predict behavior When attitudes are strong and consistent, awareness of the attitude held, direct experience of attitude formation and external influence is minimal. Social cognition involves our effort to understand the social world. Schemas help us to organize the incoming information from the social world. Social cognition, which we just discussed at the end of this chapter, is subject to many errors, and we have discussed these errors, which are negativity bias, positivity bias and counterfactual thinking. With this, I end up for today's program. I hope you have understood the topic well. Thank you.